I am thrilled to be here once again here in Las Vegas for the SHRM Annual Conference. There are a couple things I want you to know up front. The first thing is this. This is not my full Jeopardy session because I only have 18 minutes. However, there are three things I want to make sure that you're aware of. Number one, this is Jeopardy, right? So we're answering in the form of a question. Now, it's you and like 15,000 of your closest friends here, okay? So it may be that you're thinking the answer. But don't forget about something else. You see, sometimes you come to these things and you're thinking to yourself, well, it's not really going to be fun. Oh, no. We're going to have fun and we're going to learn at the same time. So work with me here, okay? Now, you know how Jeopardy works, right? So we're going to try this. Keep track of your own points because there's the opportunity for what? Bragging rights. That's what Jeopardy is all about. So please, play with me. Here's our topic for the day, procedural pitfalls. Now, this is one of those scenarios where we'll just have to see how well you do. Here is your 100-point question, or answer, depending on how you look at it. An employer is required to provide this to an employee to ensure they are aware of what may occur if a medical certification is not adequately completed. Think about it. Thinking in the form of a question, of course, right? Okay, here we go. What are the anticipated consequences of failure to provide proper certification? Now, this actually comes out of a case from FedEx. Anybody here from FedEx? Okay, good. So, here's somebody who goes from being somebody actually offloading packages all the way up to becoming somebody who works, I know you're going to be shocked, in the legal department. Why does she go to the legal department? Wait for it. She goes to the legal department because she has medical issues and can't be doing the packing. So here's what happens. She needs to go on medical leave. And so, of course, they come to her and they say, well, okay, here's the information we need. We need you to get it back to us within 15 days. Okay, not a problem. They don't say anything else. Okay. And then there's nothing. She's out. They ultimately let her go, and she's like, wait a second. This isn't fair. What are you doing? So, of course, she files a lawsuit. You heard Michael before, right? Files a lawsuit and says, you discriminate against me because of the FMLA. Court gets it, and they say, okay, you know what? Here's the problem. You did tell her she had to get back the certification within 15 days, but you never told her what happened if she didn't get it back to you. It's a technical issue, but you know what? If you're going to lose the case, kind of a problem. So, let's go to our 200-point question. Here we go. Even after intermittent FMLA leave is granted, an employee is still required to properly follow this when taking the leave. Thinking. What is follow the employer's procedure for calling out and designating leave? Now, I know what you all have, right? You onboard someone. We all heard about it in the general session this morning. We're going to take a look at all our people, look at our leaders. You bring them in, and it's either a 3-inch binder that has the dust somewhere, or it's electronic, and they fill out their handbook. Isn't this wonderful? Only one problem. They never read it. So you know what happens? All of a sudden they need it, and they're not even thinking about it, right? We're taking leave. So here you can go out on intermittent leave, not a problem. Here we had a woman who was a nurse. Her husband ends up having liver cancer. She needs intermittent leave. Okay, no problem. Now, you know what's going to happen, right? We have someone who's taking intermittent leave for her husband who has a legitimate disease. She's got the time. Isn't this great? Oh, but wait. She apparently has an issue with getting to work. Ultimately, the employer gets a little upset. Kind of important to have a nurse actually work at the hospital. They cut her loose. She turns around, files a lawsuit saying, you messed with my intermittent FMLA leave, you owe me. Court takes a look at it and says, wait a second. You get your intermittent leave. The hospital tells you what the procedure is. It's very hard, okay? Call or email your supervisor. Tell your supervisor that you're taking qualified leave or FMLA leave, or I'm taking leave to take my husband for chemotherapy. Something that would lead them to know why you were taking leave, not, I'm going to be out. Now, you know what she did, right? I'm going to be out. So in the midst of her deposition, she says, well, 10 to 15% of the time that I was not there had nothing to do with my husband's leave. By the way, I love that, because you're thinking to yourself, case over. And you know what? You'd be exactly right. Okay, let's go to our 300-point question. Now, an employer may only deny an employee FMLA intermittent leave based on being a key employee if both of these things exist. I kind of wish I had the background music. All right, here we go. What is being among the highest paid 10% of employees within a 75-mile radius of where you are? Now, sometimes you have to laugh at the facts. And don't shoot the messenger, because it wasn't my case. But we have a public situation here with a city that took someone who was a temporary clerk, and they came up through the ranks. And you know where they ended up? Wait for it. They were the director of HR. So here's what happens. She has a medical issue. She needs to go out on intermittent leave. So she sends her request to the administrator. The administrator says, oh, I'm sorry. It's summertime. We can't possibly have our director of HR out intermittently in the summer because you are too important to our operations. You're a key employee. By the way, you can't take leave. Okay. So you know what happens. She still takes some leave because she's sick. They cut her loose. And, of course, they try to defend the future lawsuit by saying, well, of course you were a key employee. There were only two problems, by the way. The first problem was she wasn't, I know this will shock you, in the top 10% of city employees paid, let alone within 75 miles where she was. Oh, but it gets better. Because remember how these cases work. It's all about the facts. It's all about how was the decision made by the administrator to fire this person. Now, here's the funny part. And this is where it gets interesting for me. There's a discrepancy, a little discrepancy, between was it the administrator that just decided I didn't want you out, or was it, wait a second, our legal counsel gave us advice that you could have been a key employee and therefore we were going to let you go. The problem was the mere fact that there was a problem between the two questions didn't allow summary judgment to go through. Now, I don't want to sound silly, but you would think if you were going to try and avoid the FMLA, you'd actually think through the reason why you would be denying it before you were, in front of a judge. Just a thought. All right. I imagine you're all thinking about how many points you have because I know you're keeping track. Let's move on to our 400-point question. Here we go. Intermittent leave will not protect an employee from termination if the time was not used for this. Giving you a moment to think. Okay. What is the specific purpose of the intermittent leave? Now, this goes, again, under the category, you cannot make this stuff up. Here's what happens. We have a school nurse. It's September in New York City. She puts in for intermittent leave to take her daughter to therapy for some disease that she has, and she needs to be able to take her, so she wants time off. Now, you know what the school district says. You waited till September to tell us you needed intermittent leave through December. That's fabulous. Thank you so much. But okay, fine. So they give her the intermittent leave. She goes through the whole time. She neglects to tell her employer one minor point. Her daughter refused to go to treatment. So you would think she'd actually share that information with her employer. Oh, no, no, no. Oh, but wait, it gets better. Because she was getting an advanced degree. An advanced degree she had previously asked her employer to pay for, and the employer had said no. Now, I know what you're thinking, and by the way, you're right, because miraculously, all the time she needed for class happened to coincide with the exact time that she had intermittent leave. But it gets better. because 2 months after her intermittent leave ends in December, guess what she does? Anybody have tuition reimbursement? Yeah, she put in for tuition reimbursement. Amazing the things that will pop up that will then make the employer say, hold it, I don't think so. By the way, you're fired because you didn't tell us about the intermittent leave. You were out for reasons that had nothing to do with what we were talking about. And by the way, you're done. So of course, you know what happens because I'm talking about the case. Clearly, she files suit. And then what happens? Court says, this is all very interesting. Yes, your daughter had an issue. Yes, you had approved leave. But the last time we checked the regs, the last time we checked the law, there's nothing in there that says you can take intermittent FMLA leave for educational advancement. Case dismissed. Can't make it up. Now, how many points do you have? Do you have all 1,000? I'm wondering, because you know what's next. Final Jeopardy. What are you willing to wager? So let's see. Here's our topic, step by step. You cannot make this stuff up. Let's go to the question. In order for an employer to properly defend against an FMLA claim that a certification was not complete, it must do two things. I know you're deep in thought. Here we go. One is notify the employee of the deficiency and allow time for a reasonable time to cure. Now, I love this one because here we have a doctor who's in a residency. Most of the way through her first year of residency, she realizes she has a heart issue, has to go have the heart issue taken care of. Goes into the hospital, gets FMLA leave, no big deal. By the way, doctors are the worst patients. Here's why. She has an issue after the surgery, but doesn't go back to her doctor because she's a doctor. And she's still out. And ultimately, they're like, wait a second, if you need more time, you gotta give us something. So, of course, she goes to the doctor, and the doctor writes this generic note I'm sure none of you have ever seen that basically says, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. She needs to be out for another month. No deadline, no nothing, no reason. I'm sure you would accept that, but the hospital system didn't accept that. Now, there's another piece to this story that's incredibly interesting, particularly for this audience, because there wasn't one, there wasn't two, there were 3 directors of HR changes during the time of this one case. Here's why it gets interesting. Originally, when the doctor goes out, the person at the time who was running HR wrote in her own date for when she was coming back, never asked the doctor. Doctor reaches out and says, that's not right, I need a later date. Again, director of HR at the time doesn't ask, inserts some arbitrary other date. I'm sure you're shocked this person got fired. Then there's somebody else who comes in and does the HR job. They tell the doctor, don't worry about it, we'll figure it all out, not a problem. They resign. Then we have a third person doing HR who apparently doesn't talk to the director, who ultimately fires the doctor only after sending her a letter that says, hey, you need to come back or get us information because the letters you sent in weren't any good. Here's the problem. The doctor gets the letter on Friday. The deadline within the letter was the prior Wednesday. Doctor's like, how could I have possibly complied? You set me up. So she files suit. Court comes back and they're like, okay, look, this is not rocket science, okay? This is the kind of stuff where you actually have to tell somebody with enough notice, hey, look, there's a problem with the letter your doctor wrote, and 2, give them time. I mean, we all know the days we're thinking about, right? 7 days, 15 days, 30 days. Take your pick, some reasonable amount of time after you know they have it, but not here. So, couple of takeaways that these cases, because I'm sure you all got full credit, you want to be aware of. First is, make sure you tell your employees when they come to you, you know what they're like. I mean, if we're being fair about it, they're emotional, unless they're in the 20% of people that are working the system, because they're concerned that they're out, okay? You want to make sure you go through everything, including what happens if you don't follow the procedures. Then, you want to go through them and say, look, there's a whole process, particularly for intermittent leave. What is your written procedure? Did you give it to them? Did they sign off on it? which I'm sure you have somewhere in a file that you could give to somebody like me if later there's a problem. Next, listen, I'm all for trying to figure out a way not to let somebody have leave. That's fine. But why are you doing that? And are you going to figure out in advance that every T is crossed, every I is dotted, and you know exactly what you're doing? Now, not for nothing, but I know most of you have issues with intermittent leave. We all do. Here's the challenge. If you're reading something about one of your people, and the hair's standing up on the back of your neck, as you're reading through the facts, if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, ladies and gentlemen, it's a duck. There's something wrong. That's when you decide, you know what, I'm going to spend the time, I'm going to do a little investigating, maybe get an investigator to figure out what's going on before you have the genius employee that, after asking for intermittent leave for a covered reason, asked for reimbursement for something that they shouldn't be allowed to have. And finally, the real issue with the case with the doctor and what she had was very simple. There were too many people running HR, too many hands in the cookie jar, and there was no real process. The FMLA is very much, whether we like it or not, regimented. If you come up with a flow chart for your organization that runs through exactly what you need to do, whether it's intermittent or regular leave, you will find that most of the challenges I've been talking about will be things you won't find. If you have any additional questions about any of this stuff, I'll be off on the side. I want to make sure I give you a little bit of time back. And if you're interested in a few ADA issues, come and see me at 7:30 tomorrow morning right here in the Smart Stage. Thank you very much.